Good Monday afternoon, too. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Plenty of Browns to talk about. A little later in the show, Ashley Bastock from cleveland.com, the Plain Dealer, will join us. We begin with some news regarding Deshaun Watson, Browns quarterback who is facing those civil suits. According to Josina Anderson, the NFL will be meeting with Deshaun Watson in Texas this week, per league sources. With that, let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read him brownzone.com on the internet. Scott, that's something I didn't think we would see this quickly. It's kind of interesting. What's your read of that, your take of it?
Yeah, I've been told, I've had that confirmed, and it's expected to be multiple days that Watson's going to meet with NFL officials as part of the investigation. So I think the timing is interesting, but it has, in one sense, it's felt like it's kind of dragging out, right? There's no resolution. You have the schedule come out. Nobody knows if Deshaun Watson's going to be suspended or disciplined at all. And this feels like a move toward resolution. But the NFL continues to say no timetable. But this is certainly an important step in the league's investigation.
Yeah, and the other thing is it's pretty well documented that none of those civil suits are going to be heard. So the NFL is getting his side of the story, if you will, and probably substantially before those civil suits ever get heard.
Yeah, that's the big unknown to me, Dave, is can the NFL, or would the NFL, suspend or discipline Deshaun Watson without resolution of those civil suits, which, as it goes now, are not expected to even have the first trial until 2023 after this NFL season. So, I can see a scenario where the league says, we did our independent investigation. We believe we know that Deshaun Watson violated the personal conduct policy, and he's going to be suspended for X number of games. I can also see a scenario where the league isn't comfortable doing that and waits. And the third scenario is the league says, okay, we know enough to suspend Deshaun Watson, but we're going to put a caveat in that says if more comes out during the civil lawsuits, we can open up our discipline again, meaning he could be suspended to start 2022 and then suspended again in 2023. I don't know if there's precedent for that, but this seems like an unprecedented case, and maybe that's one way the league could go.
Some more news about Deshaun Watson. Again, Josina Anderson, the first to tweet this out. So he is treating the entire offense, to the Bahamas this weekend. Trip is for team building and football chemistry, as Watson has also secured a field to continue off-season workouts. We had heard that he and Myles Garrett were doing that, trying to build the chemistry. Bahamas is a pretty good place to build chemistry if you're going to do that, huh?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We've heard about the Browns trying to have more camaraderie this season than they did last year. Some players mentioned at the end of last season that they thought there could have been better team chemistry. And, the COVID protocols had something to do with that. But now you get a new quarterback in. This is commonplace, right, where the quarterback gets his guys together in the offseason. The Bahamas is a new wrinkle. The fact that it's Deshaun Watson in his first offseason with the Browns makes it, newsworthy and interesting. Certainly, you wonder how many players are going to be able to go. Guys have stuff to do on the weekends. I sure it won't be the entire offense, but if you get enough guys there, you get your receivers and running backs there, you get to go through the routes. I'm sure it is a good place to build. It's a team bond, like you said. Spend some time on the beaches. I think they have casinos down there. So from a pure football perspective, it seems like a good idea.
All right, and to kind of put in context, just how good has Deshaun Watson been as a quarterback? This is from the NFL on CBS. Last 5 NFL seasons among qualified quarterbacks, best passer rating over that time, Drew Brees, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. If you're going to be a quarterback, that's the neighborhood and the guys you want to be mentioned in as far as passer rating goes.
Oh, there's no doubt. And, passer rating isn't a perfect stat, but, it's a pretty reliable one in my eyes. And it's heavily slanted toward your touchdown and interception ratio, which means Deshaun Watson's thrown a bunch of touchdowns and hasn't thrown a lot of interceptions. And I think that's one of the places the Browns felt that Baker Mayfield fell short. He turned the ball over too many times, and Deshaun Watson doesn't have that history. He's good at protecting the ball. We know how much Kevin Stefanski and coordinator Alex Van Pelt value that. So I think that's huge, and I think that's something that if he keeps up, then you expect this Browns offense to be really good when he's playing.
The other thing that happened yesterday, Browns wrapped up rookie mini camp. A little bit of sights and sounds. Let's take a look. Browns released this as the rookies wrapped up that mini camp. And you see arriving in Berea and kind of getting ready to go. Fitted for the helmets, signing the contracts, and then out on the field. Scott, I know you were out there. Which of the either undrafted free agents or draft picks kind of piqued your interest? I know there are probably more of them, but take us through some of the things that you kind of went, okay.
Yeah, I mean, David Bell, I think we've talked about him. I'm interested. I think he's going to have a big role. We obviously know Jarvis Landry's not coming back now, so David Bell kind of steps into that role, and watched him, and he worked out of the slot a lot in the, one practice that we got to watch. Shows good hands. Not the biggest guy in the world, but he is 6'1". Watch Martin Emerson Jr., the corner who was the Browns' first pick of the draft at number 68, and does have really good size, moves pretty well for a guy that big. And again, these weren't, super full speed practices, and there's no 11 on 11 or anything, but you just get a feel for some of the size of the guys and how they move the first time. And, it's good for these guys, right? The rookies get on the field, they get coaching from their position coaches for the first time. And then this week they stay and they work with the whole team. So that's another, that might be even more jolting is, okay, you get the coaches, and that's, I'm sure the coaches are on you pretty good. And then all of a sudden you're lining up, running routes, you're going through reps next to some pretty established guys. And this is an important couple of weeks for these rookies in that draft class in particular.
Yeah, the other thing is they get the playbook and they can start trying to figure out exactly where they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to get it done. One guy that missed yesterday's session was David Bell, the aforementioned wide receiver, but there was a really good reason, and he was excused. The Browns, Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, encouraged him to go back to the graduation ceremony at Purdue. Bell had said he didn't intend to do it, but both Stefanski and Andrew Berry kind of said, no, you need to go do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, right? It's a milestone. These guys are really hard to graduate. I think David Bell was only Purdue for 3 years, so that's even more impressive. A lot of guys, it's so important to their families, right, to watch them. You still saw Jerome Bettis tweeting about, I think he just graduated from Notre Dame years and years, decades after he played there. So it's a big deal. And, one minicamp practice, and I know the third one isn't as intensive as the first two are intense. I think that's great that the Browns let him go, and they should. And, for a long time, rookies, if they weren't out, if their school wasn't done yet, weren't even allowed to participate in some of the offseason stuff. I believe the NFL has kind of softened those rules, but it's really good to see.
Yeah, and again, he genuinely seemed to appreciate that the Browns wanted him to go and be part of that ceremony. So hats off to him for getting a degree from Purdue. Great academic institution. Scott, Patrick, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break. Some interesting names being attached to the Browns as far as free agency goes. We'll also head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason with this viewer's biggest concern for the Browns this season. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can also read him on brownzone.com. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the biggest concern for the Browns in 2022.
My biggest fear is play calling. I don't know that our head coach has shown the ability to be a great offensive coordinator yet, and I would question some calls in the past, and now we'll see if that was because of Baker. So with Deshaun Watson, I'm actually worried now about getting everybody the touches and the right people on the field, because I would love to see Chubb and Hunt together. And I think the creativity of our offensive coordination is going to be a huge factor in how far the Cleveland Browns go this year.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. What about it, Scott? You concerned about that?
I think it's a legitimate concern for fans, certainly. Kevin Stefanski's not like a crazy established offensive coordinator or play caller. He's only been doing it for, 3+ years, 1+ in Minnesota and the last 2 with the Browns. I thought there have been encouraging signs from him in both his years. Obviously, 2020 was more successful than 2021, but I do get the concerns, and I think it's an unknown and a reasonable question, especially given what I think is going to be a pretty significant transition and transformation of the scheme this year. Deshaun Watson's a different quarterback than Baker Mayfield. I don't think we're going to see 2 and 3 tight ends nearly as much as we did last year. You're going to see more 3 receiver sets. The caller mentioned 2 running backs. I think you'll see more 2 running back sets. So given what I think will be a big change, it's fair to ask, how is Kevin Stefanski going to handle that? And how creative can he get? And how well will he take advantage of Deshaun Watson's pretty unique skill set? So, yeah, I think those are all questions. Now, I think Kevin Stefanski's smart enough to make it work, but it still bears watching.
Yeah, and the one thing I don't think many people would argue about, Deshaun Watson's going to be the best quarterback that he's ever had running his offense. That'll help. This is kind of interesting as well. So a name that continually is getting more and more linked to the Browns is defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh. So right now, Raiders, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Browns are in the mix to sign the 5-time Pro Bowler Ndamukong Suh. And then the other thing to keep in mind about Suh is he's been in the NFL 12 years, so he's getting a little up there. But he's had at least 35 pressures per season in those 12 years. Now that's ridiculously consistent. Keep in mind he plays tackle, so it's from the interior. If that's legit and he's still as good as he appears to be, that'd help a lot.
Yeah, he's certainly the kind of defensive tackle the Browns are looking for, right? This kind of, when they mention Perry and Winfrey, why they drafted him, a guy that can penetrate, a guy that gets up the field. And that's who Suh has been throughout his career. I did some research on that today. I talked to one person that told me, yes, the Browns are in the mix, but nothing's imminent, and that Tampa Bay is still heavily involved there, which seems like, natural for him to go back there. That's where he won a Super Bowl just a couple of years ago. But if things don't work out there, maybe the Browns are able to step in and draw him and lure him to Cleveland. Then I talked to somebody else who didn't think, again, nothing was imminent, but wasn't sure that the Browns were even in the mix. but he's a guy worth keeping an eye on, especially because we've talked about it a million times, Dave. They don't have like a marquee guy at defensive tackle. And even though he's getting up there, I think Sue would still qualify as kind of a marquee guy. He'd be a veteran in a room that's full of young guys. So he makes some sense, certainly as long as the money is right and as long as he doesn't go back to Tampa.
And you're right. Tampa has the appeal with Tampa got a lot more when Tom Brady came out of retirement. I know you wrote an article about Perrion Winfrey. Took 97. He's a guy, Scott, if he can play like it appears he can play, Cleveland's going to love this guy.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And, I was kind of, I don't want to go overboard with him because, he's a fourth-round pick and he hasn't played one snap and who knows. But there's certainly a lot of interesting stuff that he says, and he's a really charismatic guy. I mean, I think we've all seen that already in that first video. And there's being around him Friday in Berea, you could see that. And, so there was a bunch of stuff I could have written about him. I'm still hoping to write more and talk to his coach at Oklahoma. But just, from Friday, he's got 9 and 7 tattooed on his two hands because that was his number, like in high school and junior college. And then he gets drafted by the Browns and the equipment guy calls him and says, hey, we got one number, it's 97. And he's like, oh, it's like an example of destiny. And he's barked his whole life for whatever reason, right? Like when he gets excited on the field, he barks. And obviously we know the Browns' tradition with barking. So a lot of it, he's a big LeBron guy too. So like a lot of it fits with why he thinks this is the spot he's supposed to be.
And just the way he is, you'll remember, Minifield and Dixon, the guys that started it, he'd fit right. He is a bigger version of those two. He is a defensive lineman version of Frank Minifield and Hanford Dixon, without question. And I mean that as a compliment. Another guy that you got to talk a little bit about, Martin Emerson. He talked about the SEC kind of preparing him for what he's going to see in the NFL, at least a little bit.
It was fun, going to compete, going to compete at guys that's going to make you better every snap. You got to bring your A game and your big boy shoulder pads every game. It's like every week you're playing against a great guy, a great talent. So you got to go in and focus and lock in every play. So.
And Scott, I know you're working on a feature for Emerson. Take us a little bit through what you found and what we can expect to read in those.
Yeah, I talked to his cornerback coach at Mississippi State, and one of the things that stuck with me is, he's 6'2", so he's big, and that's rare size. And we talk about that. But also his physicality, right? Is he willing to come up and make a hit? And he said that there's a hit against Kentucky that he made early. It was like Kentucky's first drive. And he came up, it was a broken play, came up and lit this receiver up. He was Wandale Robinson, who winds up getting drafted in the second round. And Emerson got thrown out because they called it targeting. It was a close call. Looked like he had his hands out in front, but he also ducked his head a little bit. But the coach and Martin said that it excited the team. They wound up going on to win. They think that's a big reason because it really juiced up the team. And then Kevin Stefanski said, like on an early drill, he knocked down one of the coaches, and that's just another sign of his physicality. So obviously he needs to show that he can move in space, because size isn't everything and physicality is not everything. But it feels like he's got a lot of the tools. And I know the Browns are impressed with how he held down his side of the field against SEC competition, right? I mean, there's some big names that he mentioned that he went up against. So they like him off the field. His coach, Darcel McBath, said the number one strength is how he understands the game. And Emerson attributes that to the amount of film study he does. So he does really feel like a well-rounded guy, which makes you understand why the Browns took him at number 68, when really it was a surprise that they would go corner with their first pick.
And if you think about it, 6'2" corner, you almost need that with what you're going to see, especially kind of in the red zone, because there's some bigger wide receiver targets that, Chase, Jamar Chase comes to mind immediately, but you're going to have guys that he will match up better with just because he's 3-4 inches taller.
Sure, and we talk about when there's smaller corners, that's the first thing we ask about. Well, how do you make up for not having that height? And that's something you don't have to talk about with him. Now, is he as fast as those 5'10" guys? Probably not. But Kevin Stefanski pointed out that when you have a 33-inch reach or whatever it is, that helps you close the gap, right? And you don't have to be quite as close on a guy because you have that size and length to him. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits. I mean, the Browns have Ward, they have Newsome, they have Greedy Williams, they have A.J. Green. Just what kind of niche he's able to carve out for himself right away.
Yeah, pretty good room when you look at it, and all reasonably young as well. Scott, Patrick, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll turn our attention to the wide receiver room. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Thanks for buying a fishing license. I want you to picture all the great things this simple purchase does. Like building public boat ramps, keeping local waters clean, and maintaining a healthy fish population.
What's Mom doing?
When you buy a fishing license, you do a lot. Every dollar protects and maintains your local waterways for future generations to enjoy. Visit takemefishing.org.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. Also, you can read him on brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns wide receivers.
I don't feel that the wide receiver group is kind of what I thought it would be. That doesn't mean we might not get free agent from Miami or someone else. There's 3 roster spots open. I'm hoping one of them goes to a good veteran wideout. But if it turns out to be Cooper, Peoples-Jones, and maybe even rookie starter Bell, I'd call that an average group. Not great, not terrible. But then I started thinking, receiving yards don't just have to go to wideouts. You've got one of the best in the entire league in Kareem Hunt, catching screens, catching short little passes, maybe even catching, 25-yard pass. Nick Chubb, it's not his specialty, but we've seen him go a long way on a couple of last-minute passes to him. And, of course, Njoku, I believe, is a huge factor this year. If he can get half of what that speed and strength and mobility should get him and become a good route runner and a smart player, I think his potential is practically sky high.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I'd say wide receiving room, I wouldn't say it's average. It's unproven. I think that's fair other than Amari Cooper. But they have a lot of guys that can be weapons.
Well, I think that's what they're counting on. And kind of like the caller mentioned, if you don't go get a number 2 receiver, which we've talked about a billion times, and it doesn't feel like the Browns are in a rush to do that or might do it at all, right? We've seen Jarvis Landry wind up elsewhere. Then it's okay, well, it is David Bell, and it's Donovan Peoples-Jones, and it's Anthony Schwartz. And the Browns certainly expect Peoples-Jones and Schwartz to take a step up in year 3 and year 2. And then it's okay, well, if those guys aren't necessarily a super strength of the team, right, then you have to make up for that. And part of that is with your tight end group, which, I think that remains unproven. And Njoku's been here a long time and hasn't had a breakout statistical season. Same with Harrison Bryant in his couple of years. But then you do have Kareem Hunt, and you have the strong running game. and you have an upgraded quarterback, assuming Deshaun Watson's on the field, and you think he's going to make everybody better. So I kind of get the sense that the Browns feel like maybe the sum of their parts is greater than the individual parts, given their quarterback especially, but then when you throw in the offensive line and the running game, that they can make it work with the other guys that they have outside and at tight end.
Yeah, and I get that line of thinking. Again, you got to have one or two of those guys kind of up their play a little bit to make it work. You mentioned Jarvis Landry. So this tweet from Ian Rappaport, Landry signs a one-year deal, base value $3 million. Incentives can get him another $3 million, but just a one-year deal. And here's Landry on why he chose the Saints.
I think there were some opportunities out there, but, as we continue to game plan on, what I really wanted, and what I wanted to achieve and accomplish, that quickly got narrowed down to a few teams, and once it played out and got to where it was after the draft, the situation about money, it was more about, like you said, it was about fit, it was about location, and those became the priorities for me and my camp in making the decision to be a New Orleans Saint.
Scott, are you surprised it's just a one-year, $3 million base? That seems a little bit lower than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if that was the market, and it clearly was, right? We're into May, and Jarvis didn't have a longer-term option that he thought was better, then I think the 1 year makes sense, because then you say, okay, if I have a bounce-back year from a year that he was, missed time with injuries and didn't have the same production, and there's a million reasons for that, then he can get back on the market and look for a bigger money, longer term deal a year from now. So if you're not going to get big money, you're better off signing the 1 year deal, certainly. And it's interesting, though. I mean, Jarvis is such a proven guy that you would think that there'd be more money for him on the market. And I think it speaks to his age. It speaks to coming off the injury a year ago, which really was the first time he missed any time in his career with injuries. And then the influx of young receiver talent in the draft, I think, makes it tougher for some of these older receivers to make big money.
Yeah. We've kind of addressed this. This is, again, from your mailbag. Do you think they add a veteran wide receiver? You're looking at it, I could see where you would, but it doesn't seem like it, does it?
It doesn't. And, part of me says, yeah, there's a hole at number two. But the other part of me says, if you get a number two, then all of a sudden, it's David Bell your 3, and then it's Peoples-Jones your 4, and Schwartz your 5. And I don't think Andrew Berry wants Peoples-Jones to be a 4 and Schwartz to be a 5. I mean, especially Schwartz, they spent big draft capital, right? A third-round pick a year ago is pretty significant draft capital and a resource. And I don't think and I know the Browns aren't ready to give up on him, so I don't think they say, yeah, we're going to slot him at number 5. So now if the perfect guy came up for, little money and you could get him on a cheap 1 year deal, sure, you can add him to the mix. But I do think the Browns feel pretty comfortable with the group and the offense as a whole.
All right, before we go to break, again, this is another one of your mailbags, and I think it's an interesting question. Would you rather trade Kareem Hunt or Uranus Johnson?
Yeah, I would go Uranus Johnson. And I know he had a really strong year last year. But they're both in the last year of their contracts, assuming Uranus signs his tender, which he really has no other options. And I know he's cheaper than Kareem Hunt, so, I get that. But I just think Kareem Hunt's a better player. And last year's injuries and missed time aren't scaring me away. And I think he's highly motivated, and I like how he works with Nick Chubb, and I think they're a great 1-2 balance. I think he catches the ball better than Uranus Johnson does. Not that Johnson's bad, but I think Hunt's really, really good at that. So I would, if you're trying to win the Super Bowl, which the Browns are, and you have enough cash, enough salary cap space, I don't think you're going to get anything back for him significant in a trade, no matter if it's Hunt or Johnson. So just given on the field, I would keep Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think both of them can play. So, but if you really want them, you can go out and get them as a free agent next year, in all likelihood. From the other team's perspective. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll turn our attention initially to the defensive side of the football and that D-line. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Patrick from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can also read them, brownzone.com on the internet. All right, let's take a look at this tweet from Jack Duffin. So Jerry Hughes signed last week, and Melvin Ingram is signing with the Dolphins. So Jadeveon Clowney now like the only guy out there. Trey Flowers is really the only other realistic choice, but probably not in the same class as the other guys. So, Scott, we keep saying it seems like Clowney is coming back to the Browns. It's the options are getting real slim there.
They are. You know, I look at the list, and, you know, I think Jason Pierre-Paul's on it, Ryan Kerrigan, Justin Houston, older options. So, yeah, I mean, Clowney's the best of the bunch, for sure. It's a little bit like the receiver spot that if you slide him into number 2, all of a sudden you're like, man, you can feel really good about that group if you're the Browns. Without him, there's some question marks. How does Alex Wright, the rookie, fit? You know, is Chase Winovich the third down pass rusher that you need? So, yeah, I mean, I keep going back and forth on Clowney. You know, is it 50-50 that he comes back? Is it a little better than 50-50 he comes back? I'd probably say it's a little better than 50-50, but he's a tough guy to figure out. And if he doesn't, you know, the Browns could just go with who they have, but it's almost like receiver, like I said, where you feel like they're a little bit short, and maybe one veteran to add to that group that is he can rush on third down and kind of work in with Alex Wright and Stephen Weatherly and Winovich and some of the other guys you have, Isaiah Thomas. I mean, they drafted 2 defensive ends, so they have numbers. They just don't have that marquee guy opposite Myles Garrett.
All right, so hold that thought. Let's take a look at this. Bleacher Report with every team's biggest remaining offseason need. And for the Browns, so it's the defensive line. My question to you is the way that they play, and you see they're closely connected, Jadeveon Clowney, Pierre-Paul if Clowney doesn't pan out. We've already talked about that. You see Winovich, Winfrey, all the guys there. With the way the Browns want to play defense, isn't the defensive line hugely important, especially you want to keep guys off JOK. They want to play some safeties. It's incumbent upon that defensive line to kind of get pressure on the quarterback. Isn't that a huge position group that they kind of rely on?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You know, and all the corners talk about that, right? How important the guys up front are, and it takes pressure off of them. And, you know, you mentioned the run game, which we overlook a lot of times, but that is important. And I don't know if the Browns have – I don't think they have a quote-unquote run stopper in that group right now. So, yeah, I think, you know, again, they threw numbers at those positions, you know, drafted a lot of guys on the line, signed a bunch of guys, but no big-name guy. And that's why you keep thinking, okay, are they going to sign a guy like Clowney? Are they going to sign a guy like Sue? And if they did, then I think the perception certainly changes about what they have across the line. I just don't know exactly how Andrew Berry feels. Like maybe he feels like, hey, we did enough at these spots. We feel like we have enough flexibility. We feel like Alex Wright and Perry and Winfrey can have kind of immediate impacts. But I also think he's out there looking for the perfect fit at the perfect cost because I don't think he can be completely comfortable at either spot, interior or on the edge.
Yeah, and again, I think you kind of hit it right. You don't want to overpay for a guy that isn't going to be able to help you much. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. An interesting question about last year's season.
Yeah, how well do you think the Browns would have done if they had won their first game against Kansas City last year? What would have been different?
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I don't know about the first game. I kind of go back to what would have happened if Baker Mayfield didn't try, to tackle. The first game, yeah, they probably would have been hot. They would have been on a high from beating Kansas City. I think the thing that kind of sent that season out of control was the injury to the quarterback.
Yeah, they're both interesting ideas to play with. If you think about week one, if Baker had led a fourth quarter drive, right, then you think differently about his season because we talked so much about 0 for 5 with the chance to win a game at the end. And then you feel good about it and you beat a Super Bowl team. But they still bounced back and won their next 3 games, right, to get to 3-1. The week 2 injury to the shoulder, certainly a turning point. I don't pin everything on that injury, but you can't ignore it. It affected Baker. It affected the season. It affected the offense. It affected his future. So I get that. They're both interesting scenarios, what ifs. I personally think that the Browns still would have realized that Baker wasn't the long-term answer and tried to find another alternative. But maybe they don't feel the need or the urgency if Baker played better. And they don't go chasing Deshaun Watson with everything that means. And as for week one, it would have given them confidence. But they still bounced back and got off to a reasonable start.
Yeah, and you always play that game when a year didn't go like you expected it to, especially when the expectations were so high. This is from the Bleacher Report again, and it's realistic trade packages for Baker Mayfield. So Browns get a 2023 fourth-round pick, a 2024 second-round pick. Okay. Let's look at another one. Seattle, Browns get a 2023 third-round pick, a 2024 third-round pick. Okay, yeah, I think you check that one off too. Fourth one, the Browns get a 2023 third-round pick, a 2024 fourth-round pick from the Texans. Scott, I think they'd take any of those at that point. I mean, right now the thing is there's no sense of urgency by anybody to acquire Baker Mayfield. They think he's going to be there if they need him.
I agree with that. And I think on the Browns side, Andrew Berry feels like if he's willing to take on a bunch of that salary, right, pay it as part of the deal, then he can move Baker. I think Andrew believes that. But when they talk about realistic packages, I don't think the Browns would get any of that for Baker. I really don't. I think they'd be lucky to get a fourth-round pick that could turn into a third depending on Baker's playing time. I don't think you're getting 2 picks back. I think if you really want to improve that status of the draft picks, you'd have to throw in even more money. So those seem like the Browns are going to have to settle for less, in my eyes.
Yeah, I was shocked that somebody put a second-round pick in there. I think if they could make that trade, they'd have done it yesterday. If they would have got a second-round pick in any year, they would have done that immediately upon the offer.
Yeah, I think that's where I think they put it at second-round pick in March, and then nobody had any interest, and now it just continues to fall. So I'd be stunned if they got a second-round pick back, and I'd be stunned if they got 2 decent picks back.
So there's been some talk going around, Baker Mayfield should kind of show up to camp at some point in time. And the thought isn't, that he's going to do anything other than put a sense of urgency in Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to try to go out and seek a trade. Thoughts about that? And it would admittedly be awkward, without question.
Right. It would be awkward on every side. You know, I get the thought that, hey, Baker is probably better off. Other teams see him on the field and throwing the ball. He's coming off the shoulder. Shows that he can kind of be the good soldier and go along. There's probably some benefit in that for Baker. And if he is going along and not creating any waves, then the Browns could probably live with him in the building, even though it would be incredibly awkward. I don't know. I still think the Browns are better off just trying to ship him, take whatever they can get rid of him, and, you know, before mandatory minicamp comes, you know, but they could live with it. Like, I probably would be ending the world if he shows up. But I think the closer you get to the season, if you bring him back for training camp, then it just becomes either, you know, distraction's a popular word. It just becomes unnecessary for a guy that doesn't want to be here and the team doesn't want him to be here. And do you really want to spend your reps on him? No. So what value does it have for either side?
Yeah. I mean, that's when you think about the reps, you want to give them to Brissett, Watson, Dobbs, guys that you might have to rely on at some point in the season. Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you read him on the internet, brownzone.com. You can also get him at the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, the Browns beat reporter. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. On the other side of the break, we're talking NFL offseason grades. Sports4CLE, be right here. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns. Let's take a look. Pro Football Focus has graded all 32 NFL teams off-season. Here is what they had to say about the Browns. Off-season grade B+, free agency grade above average, draft grade B. Let's welcome in Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Ashley, as always, appreciate the time. Off-season grade B+, Amari Cooper, Deshaun Watson. Really the thing that everybody has said when we talk about this, they needed to upgrade the passing game. Those two are a pretty significant upgrade, so B+ is probably really fair.
I agree. You know, I would have them right around this range if I was also giving out grades. I think when you talk about upgrading the passing game, one thing a lot of people wanted initially in the draft was them to take another younger receiver with that 44th pick, which obviously they ended up trading down and got some other picks out of that. So it's kind of like, oh, would you have rather had that other receiver who maybe they weren't as sure about? or are you glad they got Perry Winfrey and Cade York? It's kind of that weighing all of those options. But I think this is right, and I think a lot of people are maybe hedging that grade a little bit, not knowing what this season is going to hold for Deshaun Watson, how many games he may or may not miss, if a suspension is coming at all, if it might get pushed into next season. These are all sort of unanswerable questions right now. But obviously on the surface level, when you're talking about play on the field and stats and all of that sort of thing, that was a huge upgrade at quarterback that a lot of teams around the league were looking to make, and that the Browns ultimately pulled off. So I think a B+ grade. And like you said, when you consider they brought in Amari Cooper as well, who in my opinion is the best route runner in the NFL, really solid work in terms of upgrading that passing game and making those moves in order to do that.
This is also kind of interesting and kind of figures into what we talked about, where a lot of people wanted him to take a wide receiver in that second round. So ESPN has the player from each team that benefited most from the draft. And for the Browns, it's actually wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones. So when you see that Donovan Peoples-Jones benefited most from the draft, and you see Bell and he's kind of operating out of the slot, that just means Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones are on the outside. When you look at that, do you see where they're going with that as well?
Oh, 100%. And especially as somebody who's gotten very familiar with Donovan over the years, and especially I wrote a big story on him last year, how he was kind of ready for his moment. He felt like after the Odell Beckham Jr. situation transpired here in Cleveland. So I think this is a big year for him, quite honestly, because for so long, I think Donovan has been at his best on this team, especially when he's been kind of that number 3 option. So if you're looking at him as the starter opposite of Amari Cooper is going to draw a lot of attention. But it's time to really, I think, prove it for him and what his getting close to what his ceiling might be here with the Browns in the NFL. But I think overall a really good opportunity for Donovan Peoples-Jones to kind of prove that. And he wasn't able to, I think, be the deep threat that the Browns really needed last year. But I don't know that that's his best role necessarily. So I am curious if they do have him looking to do that a little more, if they think he's going to be much better in that role just by nature of having Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. So definitely an interesting year for him. And I would say Anthony Schwartz as well, another young guy who missed some time last year with a concussion and some injuries, and definitely will be interesting to see how they develop with a different quarterback. And I think that's what the Browns are interested to see as well.
The other thing that, so rookie minicamp wrapped up Sunday, Cade York admitted that he got to talk to Phil Dawson, and I know that kind of intrigued you. Take us through what that meant and kind of what you got from Cade York.
Yeah, that was definitely, I think, one of the more interesting conversations that we got as a beat on Friday. And we were joking that, of course, Phil Dawson is part of the Cleveland trifecta that you can bring up at a Browns training camp. We also had LeBron James mentioned, and we got Joe Hayden, not Joe Thomas. But Phil Dawson, definitely a part of that. Of course, if you are kicking in Cleveland, you are going to get asked about Phil Dawson. So Cade York made sure he had that conversation ahead of time. That occurred the Friday before training or rookie minicamp actually started. And it sounded like they talked a lot about kicking in Cleveland. For one thing, the mental side of it, how fans will love you if you're doing well and maybe not be so nice if you aren't. But really, that's the case, I think, with any passionate football group, fan group, whether you're playing in college or playing at the NFL level. So Cade York says he's prepared for that. He says it reminded him a lot of the LSU fans, where obviously he played in college. The other thing they talked about a lot, and it's a big question, I think, with Cade York, is how he will be able to manage the weather, kicking off the shores of Lake Erie for all of those home games, and if he's going to be able to handle a little bit more adverse weather conditions than he did in college. So, of course, there is nobody better to get advice from on that than Phil Dawson, who mastered that in 14 years in Cleveland. Truly the best person I think you could ask. So for me, it's a positive sign that this guy is already willing to put in the work on that mental side of the game and figuring things out, because we all know kicking is so mentally based. Like, it's a huge part of the game besides all of the physical stuff you have to do. And like Kevin Stefanski said, you can't kick every day. In the NFL, it's just the reality. You have to maximize those reps, and you also have to maximize your time off the field.
Yeah, the other thing is he already went out and kicked in First Energy Stadium, which, again, you want to get a feel for it. You were out at rookie minicamp. What did you take away from it? When you walked away, what did you say about just the whole rookie minicamp?
I would say, and we've talked about this as a staff, that a lot of these guys who they drafted really, from what we saw, were kind of talking the talk and walking the walk. I know when the Browns first drafted, I'll use Martin Emerson as the example. With their first pick in this year's draft, he's a third rounder, and people thought another cornerback. Now, obviously that move made sense maybe like 24 hours later when we find out they're getting rid of Troy Hill. They traded him. But you see Martin Emerson, you see his length, you see the way he moves on the field. He knocked a coach over in a non-contact drill that they ran on Friday. These guys just look like they belong. Perry and Winfrey too, same type of thing. So just singling those two guys out, but it really goes for a lot of the draft picks. It'll be interesting to see what they look like when they're matched up against vets, when we get to training camp and things like that. But at least right now, they stand out, I think, out on the field. And that's what you want with your draft picks, right? Like, as opposed to the undrafted guys or guys you're bringing in for tryouts. You want them to stand out, and I think they did that.
The other thing is Perry on Winfrey. He's the type of guy that if he plays well, he's going to own Cleveland.
Oh, yeah. And he talked about how fans were already waiting for him at the airport. I think he went to get pizza, and he ran into some fans who were barking at him. Truly, and he talked about this, it's almost like fate that he ended up here, right? Like he said, he's talked about being a quote-unquote dog for years now. So how perfect, what better place is there to end up than Cleveland, if that's what you refer to yourself as? And I just think, obviously, the fiery energy he brings, and, we were joking that he doesn't drink coffee. Sometimes he gets so excited. Even before training camp, he got so excited he didn't sleep the night before rookie mini camp started. And he said during the Senior Bowl, he slept like an hour a night. This is a guy who loves football, who's fired up, who's already made an impression on Myles Garrett. And again, like I was saying before, fits that eye test. Like, he just looks different out on the field. So I know the Browns are hoping that they got a steal with him, and I think he's ready to kind of prove them right on that.
Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, take a look at some of the contracts that Andrew Berry has put together and where they fit. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Ashley Bastock from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Let's take a look at this tweet from Jack Duffin. So Andrew Berry not messing around with getting big extensions done quickly. Denzel Ward, highest paid defensive back for 28 days. You see, he saved an average of $0.9 million by getting it done before Jair Alexander's. Myles Garrett, highest paid defensive lineman, 14 days, $2 million average dollars per year saved by getting it done before Joey Bosa. Ashley, I've said this a couple of times, and again, Andrew Berry showed it by the contract and the trade he made with Amari Cooper. He seems to be able to kind of see around the corner and see what's ahead in terms of what's going to happen in the next month, 2 month, year in the NFL, which if you're a GM, that's the trait you want.
You know, I've said repeatedly when it comes to this Browns regime, like the thing I have the most confidence in them is in regards to how they manage the cap. Andrew Berry, I think, and the people that he hires are just so good at this. People may remember around the time of the draft, I believe it was Easter weekend, Andrew Berry's wife, Britton, tweeted out some old notebooks that they found at his from his mom's house, I believe, that he was managing the cap in like 5th grade. He was playing around. That was what he did for fun. So it's understandable, I think, why he is so good, like you were saying, at seeing ahead. And we know how the NFL works. Like, this essentially becomes an arms race with these really good free agents. So it makes sense that Andrew Berry shows these guys he values them. He pays them well. Like we said, Denzel Ward was the highest paid corner at one point, and then other teams have to kind of rise and meet that. And we even saw the Browns do that themselves in the middle of the season. They extended Wyatt Teller. He became the highest paid guard in the NFL. And I believe a day or two later, they extended Joel Bitonio, and then he became the highest paid guard in the NFL on a per year basis. They're just really good, I think, at understanding what the market around the league is going to look like for these guys. And like you said, we saw that with Amari Cooper. They got him at a bargain when you look at what some of these free agent wide receivers went for this offseason so far. So overall, I just think you really can't commend them enough for how well they are able to sort of see into the future, predict things, and then show these guys, yeah, they're willing to pay for them, but they do it in a timely manner that it works out really well for the Browns as an organization too.
So we've alluded to it. The highest paid cornerbacks on average per season basis. And here's where it currently sits. Jair Alexander just signed that $21 million a year. Denzel Ward, 20.1. Jalen Ramsey, 20. Humphrey, Lattimore. And again, nothing in the NFL is going to go down. The salary cap is going up, so salaries are going up as well.
Exactly. And, you know, for a guy like Denzel Ward, I think that's part of the reason why it was maybe one of the biggest remaining questions of the offseason. And for me, it was honestly one of the only questions I really had about this secondary. The secondary was so good last year. I think Andrew Berry really took care of getting a lot of pieces last offseason, especially with Greg Newsome and signing John Johnson III. Like, those were some big time moves, and you kind of saw it pay off as these guys got used to playing with each other. And that starts with Denzel Ward. I think a lot of people knew this extension was going to be so important for them to get done. And obviously Denzel Ward's a great story, being a hometown guy as well, but he's coming off of a career year. So again, it just kind of goes to show the timing for the Browns on this was really well done. They didn't wait a moment too late, I don't think.
The other thing is, word's coming out that the NFL is going to talk to Deshaun Watson later this week. Does that kind of signal to you, and it's probably going to be multiple days, does that signal to you that there may be some resolution to his situation in the short term as opposed to the longer term?
You know, I'm not really sure. And for me, the thing that always is going to make me wonder it is if these civil suits get pushed back. And if they aren't going to happen until after the season, will that make the NFL kind of want to wait until there is a resolution? And there's not really a way to gain any insight on that. I think when the schedule came out, people were thinking, looking at the beginning of the Browns schedule, trying to guess how many games he might be out for. I don't think that's how this works, because it's an independent investigation that when the NFL is making the season schedule, they weren't too concerned about that when they're looking at the Browns. So I just think overall it's really hard to glean as this stuff is ongoing what things might mean until we see a resolution. I think it's going to be really hard to predict when that resolution might actually come.
Ashley Bastock, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Ashley.
Thank you. Ashley
Bastock. Make sure you read her Pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest Mary Kay Cabot, the Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com, as well as Brad Ward from brownswire.com. That's tomorrow at 4 o'clock on Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here then. Have a great night, everybody.